And we're back. This is CPRmetro.org, community progressive radio for the metropolitan New York area and the world.
To me. I despise, 'cause it means destruction of this life. War means tears to thousands of mothers' eyes when their sons go off to fight and lose their lives. I said war. Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely.
We're back. This is part 4 of CPRmetro.org's look at the largest rally in human history, which took place February 15th, 2003, 10 years ago. We've been looking at the run-up to that war, the building of resistance to that war, and the run-up to the largest demonstration in history. After that, we'll look at what's happened since. And over the course of the coming week, we'll be looking at what needs to be done next. This is CPRmetro.org.
Listen to me. It ain't nothing but a heartbreaker. It's got one friend, that's the Undertaker. Has shattered many young men's dreams, made him disabled, bitter and mean. Life is much too short and precious. He's been fighting wars each day. War can't give life, it can only take it away. Oh, war. Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely. Say it again. War. Oh, Lord. What is it good for? Absolutely. Listen to me. War. It ain't nothing but a heartbreaker. War. Friend only to the Undertaker. Woo! Peace, love, and understanding. Tell me, is there no place for them today? They say we must fight to keep our freedom, but Lord knows there's got to be a better way. Oh, war, God, y'all. What is it good for? You tell me. Say it, say it, say it, say it. War. Good God, man. What is it good for? Stand up and shout it.
After the massive rally that took place in Washington, D.C. on October 26th, 2002, the effort to organize resistance to the war that was coming continued, and Answer Coalition and others, including the International Action Center, organized another action for January 18th. We're going to go to that right now.
Cynthia McKinney!
We are gathered here today on this cold D.C. day to prevent a war in the hot sands of Iraq. In the bitter coldness of apartheid Cape Town, Bobby Kennedy spoke words of hope to black and white South Africans, encouraging them to stand for their ideals, act to help others, strike out against injustice, and sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression. Yet in 1966, no one could foresee that Nelson Mandela, then apartheid's political prisoner, would be sworn in as South Africa's president, and yet he was. The struggle against apartheid certainly didn't start with Bobby Bobby Kennedy, but Bobby Kennedy did his part. Dr. King warned us that we have guided missiles and misguided men. When Dr. King decided to speak out against an evil and unjust war, even though he knew the consequences might be death, he decided that he had no choice but to speak out against the war in Vietnam. Knowing the consequences, Dr. King did his part. And that's why we're here today. Even though this movement doesn't start with us, each one of us will do our part for justice, for peace at home and abroad. And in our quest for justice at home, Mr. President, we won't forget that your brother trampled on the voting rights of the poor and the people of color. You are in the White House and you have a privilege that you didn't earn. Mr. President, where is your mandate to take this country off to war? And we won't forget, Mr. President, that while you push your plan to drill for oil in Alaska, you still haven't told us the role that Enron played in shaping your plan. It was cold last night, Mr. President, and all across our country it was especially cold for the 250,000 veterans who sleep on our street every night. In no other rich democracy on this planet do so many people have so little. Yet the proposed stimulus package will give billions more to the wealthy. What about us, Mr. President? What about us? On this Dr. King weekend, let us remember that there was a time when the United States was loved around the world. Loved because, like our fallen martyrs, when America saw wrong, we tried to right it. When we saw suffering, we tried to heal it. And when there was war, we tried to stop it. The work that we do today is noble and good. The work for justice, for peace, at home and abroad. Thank you.
That was Cynthia McKinney on January 18th, 2003. Outside of the White House in Washington, D.C., 10 days before George Bush gave this, his State of the Union message, which was the part that Senator Joe Biden called for, and that was for Bush to explain why we had to go to war in what turned out to be 2 months' time. This is CPRmetro.org, community progressive radio for the metropolitan New York area and the world, and we're examining the run-up to the war in Iraq, celebrating February 15th, 2003.
Mr. Speaker, Vice President Cheney, members of Congress, distinguished citizens, and fellow citizens. Every year, by law and by custom, we meet here to consider the State of the Union. This year we gather in this chamber deeply aware of decisive days that lie ahead. You and I serve our country in a time of great consequence. During this session of Congress, we have the duty to reform domestic programs vital to our country. We have the opportunity to save millions of lives abroad from a terrible disease. We will work for a prosperity that is broadly shared, and we will answer every danger and every enemy that threatens the American people. In all these days of promise and days of reckoning, we can be confident. In a world of change and hope and peril, our faith is sure, our resolve is firm, and our union is strong. This country has many challenges. We will not deny. We will not ignore. We will not pass along our problems to other Congresses, to other presidents, and other generations. We will confront them with focus and clarity and courage. During the last 2 years, we have seen what can be accomplished when we work together. To lift the standards of our public schools, we achieved historic education reform, which must now be carried out in every school and in every classroom so that every child in America can read and learn and succeed in life. To protect our country, we reorganized our government and created the Department of Homeland Security, which is mobilizing against the threats of a new era. To bring our economy out of recession, we delivered the largest tax relief in a generation. To insist on integrity in American business, we passed tough reforms, and we are holding corporate criminals to account. Some might call this a good record. I call it a good start. Tonight I ask the House and the Senate to join me in the next bold steps to serve our fellow citizens. Our first goal is clear. We must have an economy that grows fast enough to employ every man and woman who seeks a job. After recession, terrorist attacks, corporate scandals, and stock market declines, our economy is recovering. Yet it's not growing fast enough or strongly enough. With unemployment rising, our nation needs more small businesses to open, more companies to invest and expand, more employers to put up the sign that says, "Help Wanted." Jobs are created when the economy grows. The economy grows when Americans have more money to spend and invest, and the best and fairest way to make sure Americans have that money is not to tax it away in the first place. I am proposing that all the income tax reductions set for 2004 and 2006 be made permanent and effective this year. And under my plan, as soon as I've signed the bill, this extra money will start showing up in workers' paychecks. Instead of gradually reducing the marriage penalty, we should do it now. Instead of slowly raising the child credit to $1,000, we should send the checks to American families now. This tax relief is for everyone who pays income taxes, and it will help our economy immediately. 92 million Americans will keep this year an average of almost $1,100 more of their own money. A family of four with an income of $40,000 would see their federal income taxes fall from $1,178 to $45 per year. Our Our plan will improve the bottom line for more than 23 million small businesses. You, the Congress, have already passed all these reductions and promised them for future years. If this tax relief is good for Americans 3 or 5 or 7 years from now, it is even better for Americans today. We should also strengthen the economy by treating investors equally in our tax laws. It's fair to tax a company's profits. It is not fair to again tax the shareholder on the same profits. To boost investor confidence and to help the nearly 10 million seniors who receive dividend income, I ask you to end the unfair double taxation of dividends. Lower taxes and greater investment will help this economy expand. More jobs mean more taxpayers and higher revenues to our government. The best way to address the deficit and move toward a balanced budget is to encourage economic growth and to show some spending discipline in Washington, D.C. We must work together to fund only our most important priorities. I will send you a budget that increases discretionary spending by 4% next year, about as much as the average family's income is expected to grow. And that is a good benchmark for us. Federal spending should not rise any faster than the paychecks of American families. A growing economy and a focus on essential priorities will be crucial to the future of Social Security. As we continue to work together to keep Social Security sound and reliable, we must offer younger workers a chance to invest in retirement accounts that they will control and they will own. Our second goal is high-quality, affordable health for all Americans. The American system of medicine is a model of skill and innovation, with a pace of discovery that is adding good years to our lives. Yet for many people, medical care costs too much, and many have no health coverage at all. These problems will not be solved with a nationalized health care system that dictates coverage and rations care. Instead, we must work toward a system in which all Americans have a good insurance policy, choose their own doctors, and seniors and low-income Americans receive the help they need. Instead of bureaucrats and trial lawyers and HMOs, we must put doctors and nurses and patients back in charge of American medicine. Health care reform must begin with Medicare. Medicare is a binding commitment of a caring society. We must renew that commitment by giving seniors access to preventive medicine and new drugs that are transforming health care in America. Seniors happy with the current Medicare system should be able to keep their coverage just the way it is. And just like you, the members of Congress and your staffs and other federal employees, all seniors should have the choice of a health care plan that provides prescription drugs. My budget will commit an additional $400 billion over the next decade to reform and strengthen Medicare. Leaders of both political parties have talked for years about strengthening Medicare. I urge the members of this new Congress to act this year. To improve our health care system, we must address one of the prime causes of higher cost: the constant threat that physicians and hospitals will be unfairly sued. Because of excessive litigation, everybody pays more for health care, and many parts of America are losing fine doctors. No one has ever been healed by a frivolous lawsuit. I urge the Congress to pass medical liability reform. Our third goal is to promote energy independence for our country while dramatically improving the environment. I have sent you a comprehensive energy plan to promote energy efficiency and conservation, to develop cleaner technology, and to produce more energy at home. I have sent you Clear Skies legislation that mandates a 70% cut in air pollution from power plants over the next 15 years. I have sent you a Healthy Forest initiative to help prevent the catastrophic fires that devastate communities, kill wildlife, and burn away millions of acres of treasured forests. I urge you to pass these measures for the good of both our environment and our economy. Even more, I ask you to take a crucial step and protect our environment in ways that generations before us could not have imagined. In this century, the greatest environmental progress will come about not through endless lawsuits or command and control regulations, but through technology and innovation. Tonight I'm proposing $1.2 billion in research funding so that America can lead the world in developing clean, hydrogen-powered automobiles. A simple chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen generates energy which can be used to power a car, producing only water, not exhaust fumes. With a new national commitment, our scientists and engineers will overcome obstacles to taking these cars from laboratory to showroom, so that the first car driven by a child born today could be powered by hydrogen and pollution-free. Join me in this important innovation to make our air significantly cleaner and our country much less dependent on foreign sources of energy. Our fourth goal is to apply the compassion of America to the deepest problems of America. For so many in our country, the homeless and the fatherless, the addicted, the need is great. Yet there's power, wonder-working power, in the goodness and idealism and faith of the American people. Americans are doing the work of compassion every day, visiting prisoners, providing shelter for battered women, bringing companionship to lonely seniors. These good works deserve our praise, they deserve our personal support, and when appropriate, they deserve the assistance of the federal government. I urge you to pass both my faith-based initiative and the Citizen Service Act to encourage acts of compassion that can transform America one heart and one soul at a time. Last year, I called on my fellow citizens to participate in the USA Freedom Corps, which is enlisting tens of thousands of new volunteers across America. Tonight, I ask Congress and the American people to focus the spirit of service and the resources of government on the needs of some of our most vulnerable citizens. Boys and girls trying to grow up without guidance and attention, and children who have to go through a prison gate to be hugged by their mom or dad. I propose a $450 million initiative to bring mentors to more than 1 million disadvantaged junior high students and children of prisoners. Government will support the training and recruiting of mentors. Yet it is the men and women of America who will feel the need. One mentor, one person, can change a life forever, and I urge you to be that one person. Another cause of hopelessness is addiction to drugs. Addiction crowds out friendship, ambition, moral conviction, and reduces all the richness of life to a single destructive desire. As a government, we are fighting illegal drugs by cutting off supplies and reducing demand through anti-drug education programs. Yet for those already addicted, the fight against drugs is a fight for their own lives. Too many Americans in search of treatment cannot get it. So tonight I propose a new $600 million program to help an additional 300,000 Americans receive treatment over the next 3 years. Our nation is blessed with recovery programs that do amazing work. One of them is found at the Healing Place Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A man in the program said, "God does miracles in people's lives, and you never think it could be you." Tonight, let us bring to all Americans who struggle with drug addiction this message of hope. The miracle of recovery is possible, and it could be you. By caring for children who need mentors, for addicted men and women who need treatment, we are building a more welcoming society, a culture that values every life. And in this work, we must not overlook the weakest among us. I ask you to protect infants at the very hour of their birth and end the practice of partial birth abortion. And because no human life should be started or ended as the object of an experiment, I ask you to set a high standard for humanity and pass a law against all human cloning. The qualities of courage and compassion that we strive for in America also determine our conduct abroad. The American flag stands for more than our power and our interests. Our founders dedicated this country to the cause of human dignity, the rights of every person, and the possibilities of every life. This conviction leads us into the world to help the afflicted and defend the peace and confound the designs of evil men. In Afghanistan, we help to liberate an oppressed people, and we will continue helping them secure their country, rebuild their society, and educate all their children, boys and girls. In the Middle East, we will continue to seek peace between a secure Israel and a democratic Palestine. Across the earth, America is feeding the hungry. More than 60% of international food aid comes as a gift from the people of the United States. As our nation moves troops and builds alliances to make our world safer, we must also remember our calling as a blessed country is to make the world better. Today, on the continent of Africa, nearly 30 million people have the AIDS virus, including 3 million children under the age 15. There are whole countries in Africa where more than 1/3 of the adult population carries the infection. More than 4 million require immediate drug treatment. Yet across that continent, only 50,000 AIDS victims, only 50,000, are receiving the medicine they need. Because the AIDS diagnosis is considered a death sentence, many do not seek treatment. Almost all who do are turned away. A doctor in rural South Africa describes his frustration. He says, "We have no medicines. Many hospitals tell people, you've got AIDS. We can't help you. Go home and die." In an age of miraculous medicines, no person should have to hear those words. AIDS can be prevented. Antiretroviral drugs can extend life for many years. And the cost of those drugs has dropped from $12,000 a year to under $300 a year, which places a tremendous possibility within our grasp. Ladies and gentlemen, seldom has history offered a greater opportunity to do so much for so many. We have confronted and will continue to confront HIV/AIDS in our own country. And to meet a severe and urgent crisis abroad, tonight I propose the emergency plan for AIDS relief, a work of mercy beyond all current international efforts to help the people of Africa. This comprehensive plan will prevent 7 million new AIDS infections, treat at least 2 million people with life-extending drugs, and provide humane care for millions of people suffering from AIDS and for children orphaned by AIDS. I asked the Congress to commit $15 billion over the next 5 years, including nearly $10 billion in new money, to turn the tide against AIDS in the most afflicted nations of Africa and the Caribbean. This nation can lead the world in sparing innocent people from a plague of nature. And this nation is leading the world in confronting and defeating the man-made evil of international terrorism. There are days when our fellow citizens do not hear news about the war on terror. There's never a day when I do not learn of another threat or receive reports of operations in progress or give an order in this global war against a scattered network of killers. The war goes on, and we are winning. To date, we have arrested or otherwise dealt with many key commanders of al-Qaeda. They include a man who directed logistics and funding for the September the 11th attacks, the chief of al-Qaeda operations in the Persian Gulf who planned the bombings of our embassies in East Africa and the USS Cole, an al-Qaeda operations chief from Southeast Asia, former director of al-Qaeda's training camps in Afghanistan, key al-Qaeda operative in Europe, major al-Qaeda leader in Yemen. All told, more than 3,000 suspected terrorists have been arrested in many countries. Many others have met a different fate. Let's put it this way: they're no longer a problem to the United States and our friends and allies. We are working closely with other nations to prevent further attacks. American coalition countries have uncovered and stopped terrorist conspiracies targeting the embassy in Yemen, the American embassy in Singapore, Saudi military base, ships in the Straits of Hormuz and the Straits of Gibraltar. We've broken al-Qaeda cells in Hamburg, Milan, Madrid, London, Paris, as well as Buffalo, New York. We have the terrorists on the run. We're keeping them on the run. One by one, the terrorists are learning the meaning of American justice. As we fight this war, we will remember where it began, here in our own country. This government is taking unprecedented measures to protect our people and defend our homeland. We've intensified security at the borders and ports of entry, posted more than 50,000 newly trained federal screeners in airports, begun inoculating troops and first responders against smallpox, and are deploying the nation's first early warning network of sensors to detect biological attack. And this year, for the first time, we are beginning to field a defense to protect this nation against ballistic missiles. I thank the Congress for supporting these measures. I ask you tonight to add to our future security with a major research and production effort to guard our people against bioterrorism called Project BioShield. The budget I send you will propose almost $6 billion to quickly make available effective vaccines and treatments against agents like anthrax, botulinum toxin, Ebola, and plague. We must assume that our enemies would use these diseases as weapons, and we must act before the dangers are upon us. Since September the 11th, our intelligence and law enforcement agencies have worked more closely than ever to track and disrupt the terrorists. The FBI is improving its ability to analyze intelligence and is transforming itself to meet new threats. Tonight I am instructing the leaders of the FBI, the CIA, the Homeland Security, and the Department of Defense to develop a terrorist threat integration center to merge and analyze all threat information in a single location. Our government must have the very best information possible, and we will use it to make sure the right people are in the right places to protect all our citizens. Our war against terror is a contest of will in which perseverance is power. In the ruins of two towers, at the western wall of the Pentagon, on a field in Pennsylvania, this nation made a pledge, and we renew that pledge tonight. Whatever the duration of this struggle and whatever the difficulties, we will not permit the triumph of violence in the affairs of men. Free people will set the course of history. Today, the gravest danger in the war on terror, the gravest danger facing America and the world, is outlaw regimes that seek and possess nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. These regimes could use such weapons for blackmail, terror, and mass murder. They could also give or sell those weapons to terrorist allies who would use them without the least hesitation. This threat is new. America's duty is familiar. Throughout the 20th century, small groups of men seized control of great nations, built armies and arsenals, and set out to dominate the weak and intimidate the world. In each case, their ambitions of cruelty and murder had no limit. In each case, the ambitions of Hitlerism, militarism, and communism were defeated by the will of free peoples, by the strength of great alliances, and by the might of the United States of America. Now, in this century, the ideology of power and domination has appeared again and seeks to gain the ultimate weapons of terror. Once again, this nation and all our friends are all that stand between a world at peace and a world of chaos and constant alarm. Once again, we are called to defend the safety of our people and the hopes of all mankind, and we accept this responsibility. America is making a broad and determined effort to confront these dangers. We've called on the United Nations to fulfill its charter and stand by its demand that Iraq disarm. We are strongly supporting the International Atomic Energy Agency in its mission to track and control nuclear materials around the world. We are working with other governments to secure nuclear materials in the former Soviet Union and to strengthen global treaties banning the production and shipment of missile technologies and weapons of mass destruction. In all these efforts, however, America's purpose is more than to follow a process. It is to achieve a result, the end of terrible threats to the civilized world. All free nations have a stake in preventing sudden and catastrophic attacks, and we're asking them to join us, and many are doing so. Yet the course of this nation does not depend on the decisions of others. Whatever action is required, whenever action is necessary, I will defend the freedom and security of the American people. Different threats require different strategies. In Iran, we continue to see a government that represses its people, pursues weapons of mass destruction, and supports terror. We also see Iranian citizens risking intimidation and death as they speak out for liberty and human rights and democracy. Iranians, like all people, have a right to choose their own government and determine their own destiny, and the United States supports their aspirations to live in freedom. On the Korean Peninsula, an oppressive regime rules of people living in fear and starvation. Throughout the 1990s, the United States relied on a negotiated framework to keep North Korea from gaining nuclear weapons. We now know that that regime was deceiving the world and developing those weapons all along. And today, the North Korean regime is using its nuclear program to incite fear and seek concessions. America and the world will not be blackmailed. America is working with the countries of the region, South Korea, Japan, China, and Russia, to find a peaceful solution and to show the North Korean government that nuclear weapons will bring only isolation, economic stagnation, and continued hardship. The North Korean regime will find respect in the world and revival for its people only when it turns away from its nuclear ambitions. Our nation and the world must learn the lessons of the Korean Peninsula and not allow an even greater threat to rise up in Iraq. A brutal dictator with a history of reckless aggression, with ties to terrorism, with great potential wealth, will not be permitted to dominate a vital region and threaten the United States. Twelve years ago, Saddam Hussein faced the prospect of being the last casualty in a war he had started and lost. To spare himself, he agreed to disarm of all weapons of mass destruction. For the next 12 years, he systematically violated that agreement. He pursued chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons even while inspectors were in his country. Nothing to date has restrained him from his pursuit of these weapons. Not economic sanctions, not isolation from the civilized world, not even cruise missile strikes on his military facilities. Almost 3 months ago, the United Nations Security Council gave Saddam Hussein his final chance to disarm. He has shown instead utter contempt for the United Nations and for the opinion of the world. The 108 UN inspectors were not sent to conduct a scavenger hunt for hidden materials across a country the size of California. The job of the inspectors is to verify that Iraq's regime is disarming. It is up to Iraq to show exactly where it is hiding its banned weapons, lay those weapons out for the world to see, and destroy them as directed. Nothing like this has happened. The United Nations concluded in 1999 that Saddam Hussein had biological weapons sufficient to produce over 25,000 liters of anthrax, enough doses to kill several million people. He hasn't accounted for that material. He has given no evidence that he has destroyed it. The United Nations concluded that Saddam Hussein had material sufficient to produce more than 38,000 liters of botulinum toxin, enough to subject millions of people to death by respiratory failure. He hadn't accounted for that material. He's given no evidence that he has destroyed it. Our intelligence officials estimate that Saddam Hussein had the materials to produce as much as 500 tons of sarin, mustard, and VX nerve agent. In such quantities, these chemical agents could also kill untold thousands. He's not accounted for these materials. He has given no evidence that he has destroyed them. U.S. intelligence indicates that Saddam Hussein had upwards of 30,000 munitions capable of delivering chemical agents. Inspectors recently turned up 16 of them, despite Iraq's recent declaration denying their existence. Saddam Hussein has not accounted for the remaining 29,984 of these prohibited munitions. He has given no evidence that he has destroyed them. From 3 Iraqi defectors, we know that Iraq in the late 1990s had several mobile biological weapons labs. These are designed to produce germ warfare agents and can be moved from place to place to evade inspectors. Saddam Hussein has not disclosed these facilities. He's given no evidence that he has destroyed them. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed in the 1990s that Saddam Hussein had an advanced nuclear weapons development program, had a design for a nuclear weapon, and was working on 5 different methods of enriching uranium for a bomb. The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. Our intelligence sources tell us that he has attempted to purchase high-strength aluminum tubes suitable for nuclear weapons production. Saddam Hussein has not credibly explained these activities. He clearly has much to hide. The dictator of Iraq is not disarming. To the contrary, he is deceiving. From intelligence sources, we know, for instance, that thousands of Iraqi security personnel are at work hiding documents and materials from the UN inspectors, sanitizing inspection sites, and monitoring the inspectors themselves. Iraqi officials accompany the inspectors in order to intimidate witnesses. Iraq is blocking U-2 surveillance flights requested by the United Nations. Iraqi intelligence officers are posing as the scientists inspectors are supposed to interview. Real scientists have been coached by Iraqi officials on what to say. Intelligence sources indicate that Saddam Hussein has ordered that scientists who cooperate with UN inspectors in disarming Iraq will be killed along with their families. Year after year, Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths, spent enormous sums, taken great risks to build and keep weapons of mass destruction. But why? The only possible explanation, the only possible use he could have for those weapons is to dominate, intimidate, or attack. With nuclear arms or a full arsenal of chemical and biological weapons, Saddam Hussein could resume his ambitions of conquest in the Middle East and create deadly havoc in that region. And this Congress and the American people must recognize another threat. Evidence from intelligence sources, secret communications, and statements by people now in custody reveal that Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists or help them develop their own. Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained. But chemical agents, lethal viruses, and shadowy terrorist networks are not easily contained. Imagine those 19 hijackers with other weapons and other plans, this time armed by Saddam Hussein. Take one vial, one canister, one crate, slipped into this country to bring a day of horror like none we have ever known. We will do everything in our power to make sure that that day never comes. Some have said we must not act until the threat is imminent. Since when have terrorists and tyrants announced their intentions, politely putting us on notice before they strike? If this threat is permitted to fully and suddenly emerge, all actions, all words, and all recriminations would come too late. Trusting in the sanity and restraint of Saddam Hussein is not a strategy, and it is not an option.
Boy, is that the pot calling the kettle black, huh?
The dictator who is assembling the world's most dangerous weapons has already used them on whole villages, leaving thousands of his own citizens dead, blind, or disfigured. Iraqi refugees tell us how forced confessions are obtained by torturing children while their parents are made to watch. International human rights groups have cataloged other methods used in the torture chambers of Iraq. Electric shock, burning with hot irons, dripping acid on the skin, mutilation with electric drills, cutting out tongues, and rape.
This is CPRmetro.org, Community
If
Progressive
this
Radio
is
for the
not
metropolitan New York
evil,
area and the world.
then evil has no meaning. And tonight I have a message for the brave and oppressed people of Iraq. Your enemy is not surrounding your country. Your enemy is ruling your country. And the day he and his regime are removed from power will be the day of your liberation.
How's that working out?
The world has waited 12 years for Iraq to disarm. America will not accept a serious and mounting threat to our country and our friends and our allies. The United States will ask the UN Security Council to convene on February the 5th to consider the facts of Iraq's ongoing defiance of the world. Secretary of State Powell will present information and intelligence about Iraq's illegal weapons programs, its attempts to hide those weapons from inspectors, and its links to terrorist groups. We will consult, but let there be no misunderstanding. If Saddam Hussein does not fully disarm, for the safety of our people and for the peace of the world, we will lead a coalition to disarm him. Tonight I have a message for the men and women who will keep the peace, members of the American Armed Forces. Many of you are assembling in or near the Middle East, and some crucial hours may lay ahead. In those hours, the success of our cause will depend on you. Your training has prepared you. Your honor will guide you. You believe in America, and America believes in you. Sending Americans into battle is the most profound decision a president can make. The technologies of war have changed. The risks and suffering of war have not. For the brave Americans who bear the risk, no victory is free from sorrow. This nation fights reluctantly because we know the cost, and we dread the days of mourning that always come. We seek peace. We strive for peace. And sometimes peace must be defended. A future lived at the mercy of terrible threats is no peace at all. If war is forced upon us, we will fight in a just cause and by just means, sparing in every way we can the innocent. And if war is forced upon us, we will fight with the full force and might of the United States military, and we will prevail. And as we and our coalition partners are doing in Afghanistan, we will bring to the Iraqi people food and medicines and supplies and freedom.
And drones and lots of bombs. This was 10 years ago last month, folks.
Many challenges abroad and at home have arrived in a single season. In 2 years, America has gone from a sense of invulnerability to an awareness of peril, from bitter division in small matters to calm unity in great causes. And we go forward with confidence because this call of history has come to the right country. Americans are a resolute people who have risen to every test of our time. Adversity has revealed the character of our country to the world and to ourselves. America is a strong nation and honorable in the use of our strength. We exercise power without conquest, and we sacrifice for the liberty of strangers. Americans are a free people who know that freedom is the right of every person and the future of every nation. The liberty we prize is not America's gift to the world. It is God's gift to humanity. We Americans have faith in ourselves, but not in ourselves alone. We do not claim to know all the ways of providence, yet we can trust in them, placing our confidence in the loving God behind all of life and all of history. May He guide us now, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
And that was President George W. Bush on January 28th, 2003, giving the State of the Union address for 2003, complying with one of the two conditions that Senator Joseph Biden, now Vice President Joseph Biden, had suggested that he meet without force of law, because Biden had voted to authorize Bush to go to war at the same time he was talking about this, but laying out one of two conditions he thought Bush should meet in order to gain the support of the American people for the war that was now less than 2 months away. And that was to make a case to the American people. And the next step that Biden suggested was that Bush go to the United Nations, which, as you just heard, he had scheduled for February 5th, or about a week and a day later. On February 4th of 2003, a well-known British, member of the British Parliament, Tony Benn, interviewed Saddam Hussein. In other words, decided somebody should speak with him. And we're going to play that now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I am here for only one reason, to see whether in a talk we can explore, or you can help me to see what the paths to peace may be. It is my only reason, because I remember the war. I lost a brother. I never want to see another war. And there are millions of people all over the world who do not want a war. And by agreeing to this interview, which is very historic for all of us, I hope you will be able to help me. Well, I hope you will be able to say something to the world that will be significant and positive.
أولا أهلا وسهلا في بغداد. أنتم خير من يعرف
Welcome to Baghdad.
الدور الذي
You are conscious of the role that Iraqis have set out for themselves, inspired by their own culture, their civilization, and their role in human history.
وحضارتهم ودورهم الإنساني وأن مثل هذا الدور
This role requires peace in order to prosper and progress.
ويزدهر ويثمر ينبغي أن يكون في ظروف سلام. وعلى هذا الأساس
Having said that,
ومثلما يتمسك العراقيون بحقوقهم
the Iraqis are committed to their rights as much as they are committed to the rights of others.
من غير سلام
Without peace,
ستعترضهم عقبات
they will
كثيرة
be faced with many
بما
obstacles
يحول دون
that would stop them from fulfilling their human role.
الحضاري الإنساني الإيماني.
Mr. President, may I ask you some questions? The first question is, does Iraq possess weapons of mass destruction?
المسؤولين العراقيين عبر 34 عام مسؤولين العراقيين
Most Iraqi officials have been in power for over 34 years
وإنما مضى
and have
عليهم
experience of dealing with the
أكثر
outside
من
world.
34 عام ولهم تعاملات مع العالم على نطاق واسع. لذلك المنصف يعرف بأن
Every fair-minded person
المسؤولين
knows
العراقيين
that when
عندما
Iraqi
يقولون
officials
شيء
say something,
فهم
they are
صادقون فيما
trustworthy.
وقبل قليل عندما
A few minutes ago,
سألتني
when you asked
فيما
me
إذا
if I wanted
أرغب
to look
بالاطلاع
at
على
the
الأسئلة
questions
قبل
beforehand,
أن توجهها إلي مباشرة
I told
قلت
you
لك
I didn't feel the
لا
need,
أرغب أن أطلع عليها
so that we don't waste time.
لا نضيع وقتنا في الاطلاع عليها مرتين وإنما
And I gave you the freedom to ask me any question directly,
توجيهها
so that my reply would be direct.
ومن خلالكم إلى
This is an
الشعب
opportunity
البريطاني
to reach the British people
كل قوى
and the
السلام في
forces
العالم.
of peace in the world.
الحقيقة مثل ما هي.
There is only one
وعلى هذا
truth,
الأساس
and therefore
أقول لك مثل
I
ما
tell
قلت
you,
في
as I
أكثر
have
من
said on
مناسبة،
many occasions before,
بأنه ليس في
that
العراق
Iraq
أسلحة
has no
تدمير
weapons of mass
شامل
destruction
أبداً.
whatsoever.
ونتحدى من يقول
We challenge
بعكس
anyone who
أن
claims
يقدم
that we have
أبسط
to bring
الأدلة
forward
للرأي
any
العام.
evidence and present
على ما
it to
يقول.
public opinion.
I have another question which has been raised. Do you have links with Al-Qaeda?
لو لدينا علاقات
If we
مع
had a
تنظيم
relationship with
القاعدة،
Al-Qaeda and we
وكنا
believed in that
مقتنعين
relationship,
بهذه العلاقة
we
لما
wouldn't be
قدمنا.
ashamed to admit it. Therefore,
ولذلك
I would like to tell you
قد أقول لك
directly, and also through you to anyone who is interested to know, that we have no relationship with Al-Qaeda.
بأنه ليس لدينا علاقة مع القاعدة.
In relation to the inspectors, there appear to be difficulties with the inspectors. And I wondered whether there was anything you could tell me about those difficulties and whether you believe they will be cleared up when Dr. Blix and Mr. Barreda comes back to Baghdad.
أنتم تعرفون بأن كل عمل كبير
You are aware that every major event
لابد أن
must
تمر
encounter
في
some
طريقه شيء
difficulty
من الصعوبات التفصيلية
on the subject of the inspectors and the resolutions that deal with Iraq.
مثل موضوع
You must have been following it, and you must have a view and a vision as to whether these resolutions have any basis in international law.
رأي ورؤية حول صلتها أو عدم صلتها بالقانون الدولي ولكنها صدرت من
Nevertheless,
مجلس الأمن.
the Security Council produced them.
وهذه القرارات
These
سواء
resolutions,
كان
implemented or
فيما
not,
يتعلق بتطبيقها
or the
وطريقة
motivation
تطبيقها،
behind these resolutions,
أو فيما يتعلق
could lead the
بالنية
current
التي
situation to the path
كانت
of peace or
سلفها
war.
فقررتها ممكن أن تجعل الحال يروح إلى السلام، وممكن أن تجعله يروح إلى الحرب. وعلى هذا الأساس هي
it is a critical situation.
بالإضافة إلى الظلم الواقع
Let us also remember the unjust suffering of the Iraqi people. For the last 13 years, since the blockade was imposed, you must be aware of the amount of harm that it has caused the Iraqi people, particularly the children and the elderly, as a result of the shortage of food and medicine and other aspects of their life. Therefore, we are facing a critical situation. On that basis, it is not surprising that there might be complaints relating to the small details of the inspection, which may be essential issues as far as we are concerned, and the way we see the whole thing. It is possible that those Iraqis who are involved with the inspection might complain about the conduct of the inspectors, and they complain indeed. It is also possible that some inspectors, either for reasons of practical and detailed procedure or for some other motives, may complain about the Iraqi conduct.
قد يشتكون من تصرف العراقيين، ولكن كل منصف
Every fair-minded person knows that as far as Resolution 1441 is concerned, the Iraqis have been fulfilling their obligations under the resolution.
وينفذون ما عليهم بدقة أيضا.
When Iraq objects to the conduct of those implementing the Security Council resolutions, that doesn't mean that Iraq wishes to push things to confrontation. Iraq has no interest in war. No Iraqi official or ordinary citizen has expressed a wish to go to war. The question should be directed at the other side. Are they looking for a pretext so they could justify war against Iraq?
بأنهم وصلوا إلى ما يوجب أن يقوموا بالحرب على العراق أم لا؟
If the purpose was to make sure that Iraq is free of nuclear, chemical and biological weapons, then they can do that. These weapons do not come in small pills that you can hide in your pocket. These are weapons of mass destruction, and it is easy to work out if Iraq has them or not.
أن يهتدي إلى أن العراق فيه أسلحة أم ليس فيه أسلحة كيميائية وبيولوجية ونووية. وقد قلنا مرارا ونقول.
We have said many times before, and we say it again today, that Iraq is free of such weapons. So, when Iraq objects to the conduct of the inspection teams or others, that doesn't mean that Iraq is interested in putting obstacles before them, which could hinder the efforts to get to the truth. It is in our interest to facilitate their mission to find the truth. The question is, does the other side want to get to the same conclusion, or are they looking for a pretext for aggression? If those concerned prefer aggression, then it's within their reach. The superpowers can create a pretext any day to claim that Iraq is not implementing Resolution 1441. They have claimed before that Iraq did not implement the previous resolutions, However, after many years, it became clear that Iraq had complied with these resolutions. Otherwise, why are they focusing now on the latest resolutions and not the previous ones?
May I broaden the question out, Mr. President, to the relations between Iraq and the United Nations and the prospects for peace more broadly? And I wonder whether, with all its weaknesses and all the difficulties, whether you see a way in which the United Nations can realize that objective for the benefit of humanity.
The point you raised can be found in the United Nations Charter. As you know, Iraq is one of the founders and first signatories of the Charter. If we look at the representatives of the two superpowers, America and Britain, and look at their conduct and their language, we would notice that they are more motivated by war than their responsibility for peace. And when they talk about peace, all they do is accuse others they wish to destroy in the name of peace.
يريدون تدمير الآخرين لأنهم يدافعون عن السلام في إطار الحرص على شعوبهم.
They claim they are looking after the interests of their people.
بأن قولهم
You know as well as I do that this is not the truth.
نعم بإمكان
Yes, the world would respect this principle if it was genuinely applied. It is not about power, but it is about right and wrong, about when we base our human relations on good and respect this principle.
عندما نجعل الحق هو الأساس في علاقتنا الإنسانية نحترم هذا المبدأ.
So it becomes simple to adhere to this principle because anyone who violates it will be exposed to public opinion.
خروجه بلفافة ضيق على الرأي العام معرفة الحقيقة.
There are many people who believe that this present conflict is really about oil. And I wonder if you could say something about how you see the enormous oil reserves of Iraq being developed first for the benefit of the people of Iraq and secondly to meet the needs of mankind.
من المؤكد عندما نتحدث عن النفط في هذه المنطقة.
When we speak about oil in this part of the world, we are an integral part of the world. We have to deal with others in all aspects of life, economic, as well as social, technical, scientific, and other areas. It seems that the authorities in the United States are motivated by aggression that has been evident for more than a decade against the region. The first factor is the role of those influential people in the decision taken by the President of the United States of America based on sympathy with the Zionist entity that was created at the expense of Palestine and its people and their humanity.
بالإدارات الأمريكية مثل
These people force the hand of the American administration by claiming that the Arabs pose a danger to Israel, without remembering their obligation to God and how the Palestinian people were driven out of their homeland. The consecutive American administrations were led down a path of hostility against the people of this region, including our own nation, and we are part of the Arab nation. Those people and others have been telling the various United States administrations, especially the current one, that if you want to control the world, you need to control the oil.
بأنكم إذا أردتم أن تسيطروا على العالم ككل فعليكم أن تسيطروا على النفط. فمن أهم مستلزمات
Therefore, the destruction of Iraq is a prerequisite to controlling oil. That means the destruction of the Iraqi national identity, since the Iraqis are committed to their principles and rights according to international law and the United Nations Charter. It seems that this argument has appealed to some United States administrations, especially the current one, that if they control the oil in the Middle East, they would be able to control the world. They could dictate to China the size of its economic growth and interfere in its education system. And could do the same to France and Germany, and perhaps to Russia and Japan. They might even tell the same to Britain if its oil doesn't satisfy its domestic consumption. It seems to me that this hostility is a trademark of the current United States administration and is based on its wish to control the world and spread its hegemony. People have the right to say that if this aggression by the American administration continues, it would lead to widespread enmity and resistance. We won't be able to develop the oil fields or the oil industry, and therefore create worldwide cooperation as members of the human family when there is war, destruction and death. Isn't it reasonable to question this approach and conclude that this road will not benefit anyone, including America or its people? It may serve some short-term interests or the interests of some influential powers in the United States, but we can't claim that it serves the interest of the American people in the long run or the interests of other nations.
There are tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people in America, in Britain, in Europe and worldwide who want to see a peaceful outcome to this problem. And they are the real Americans, in my opinion, the real British, the real French, the real Germans. because they think of the world in terms of their children. I have 10 grandchildren. And in my family there is English, Scottish, American, French, Irish, Jewish, Indian, Muslim blood. And for me, politics is about their future, their survival. And I wondered whether you would say something yourself, direct, through this interview, to the peace movement in the world that might help to advance the cause that they have in mind.
First of all, we admire the development of the peace movement around the world in the last few years. We pray to God to empower all those working against war and for the cause of peace and security, based on just peace for all. And through you, we say to the British people that Iraqis do not hate the British people. Before 1991, Iraq and Britain had a normal relationship, as well as a normal relationship with America. At that time, the British government had no reason to criticize Iraq, as we hear some voices doing these days. We hope the British people would tell those who hate the Iraqis and wish them harm that there is no reason to justify this war. And please tell them that I say to you, because the British people are brave. Tell them that the Iraqis are brave too. Tell the British people if the Iraqis are subjected to aggression or humiliation, they would fight bravely, just as the British people did in the Second World War.
مثلما قاتل الشعب البريطاني بعد في الحرب العالمية الثانية ودافع عن بلده بشجاعة وثبات.
We will defend our country as they defended their country, each in their own way. The Iraqis don't wish war, but if war is imposed upon them, if they are attacked and insulted, they will defend themselves. They will defend their country, their sovereignty, and their security.
And they're still doing that. That was former British Member of Parliament Tony Benn speaking with Saddam Hussein on February 4th, 2003. About 8 days after exactly 1 week after George Bush gave the State of the Union speech that you heard earlier, and the day before Colin Powell went before the United Nations and said all of this. And this is CPRmetro.org, Community Progressive Radio for the Metropolitan New York area and the world. He didn't say that. You're inside our 12-hour special about February 15th, 2003, looking at it 10 years later. We've been reviewing the events from the congressional vote in October of 2002, and we're going all the way up to February 15th, 2003, and the news reports thereafter, showing step-by-step how we got there. This is Colin Powell before the United Nations, fulfilling condition number 2 of Senator Joe Biden, the ranking Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee, on what is needed to be done after the war resolution was passed in order to get the support of the American people.
Distinguished colleagues, I would like to begin by expressing my thanks for the special effort that each of you...
I'll tell you what, I have a better sounding file I think I'll play instead. Hold on 1 second. Where are we here? Right here. Yeah, this sounded better when I was listening to it earlier, so let's do this.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished colleagues, I would like to begin by expressing my thanks for the special effort that each of you made to be here today. This is an important day for us all as we review the situation with respect to Iraq and its disarmament obligations under UN Security Council Resolution 1441. Last November 8th, this Council passed Resolution 1441 by a unanimous vote. The purpose of that resolution was to disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction. Iraq had already been found guilty of material breach of its obligations, stretching back over 16 previous resolutions and 12 years. Resolution 1441 was not dealing with an innocent party, but a regime this Council has repeatedly convicted over the years. Resolution 1441 gave Iraq one last chance to come into compliance or to face serious consequences. No Council member present and voting on that day had any illusions about the nature and intent of the resolution or what serious consequences meant if Iraq did not comply. And to assist in its disarmament, we called on Iraq to cooperate with returning inspectors from UNMOVIC and IAEA. We laid down tough standards for Iraq to meet to allow the inspectors to do their job. This Council placed the burden on Iraq to comply and disarm, and not on the inspectors to find that which Iraq has gone out of its way to conceal for so long. Inspectors are inspectors. They are not detectives. I asked for this session today for two purposes. First, to support the core assessments made by Dr. Blix and Dr. El-Baradei. As Dr. Blix reported to this Council on January 27th, quote, Iraq appears not to have come to a genuine acceptance, not even today, of the disarmament which was demanded of it, unquote. And as Dr. El-Baradei reported, Iraq's declaration of December 7th, quote, did not provide any new information relevant to certain questions that have been outstanding since 1998. My second purpose today is to provide you with additional information, to share with you what the United States knows about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, as well as Iraq's involvement in terrorism, which is also the subject of Resolution 1441 and other earlier resolutions. I might add at this point that we are providing all relevant information we can to the inspection teams for them to do their work. The material I will present to you comes from a variety of sources. Some are U.S. sources and some are those of other countries. Some of the sources are technical, such as intercepted telephone conversations and photos taken by satellites. Other sources are people who have risked their lives to let the world know what Saddam Hussein is really up to. I cannot tell you everything that we know, but what I can share with you, when combined with what all of us have learned over the years, is deeply troubling. What you will see is an accumulation of facts and disturbing patterns of behavior. The facts in Iraq's behavior demonstrate that Saddam Hussein and his regime have made no effort to disarm as required by the international community. Indeed, the facts and Iraq's behavior show that Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction. Let me begin by playing a tape for you. What you're about to hear is a conversation that my government monitored. It takes place on November 26th of last year, on the day before United Nations teams resumed inspections in Iraq. The conversation involves two senior officers, a colonel and a brigadier general from Iraq's elite military unit, the Republican Guard.
الخطوط هاي اللي احنا مال الجماعه يحجون اي مال محمد البرادعي اي عندنا هاي الحاجه المطوره شنو الجواب عليه هذا خاف واحد يشوفه وجه عندك المطوره ما عندك مطوره بلا عندي وحده يا اما عامل شركه الكندي ها مال الكندي اي ما جاني رحمك الصبح هو صار عندي ملاحظات اللي اخافتهم بطيء فيه احنا خلينا ما ضل كل شيء ما احمد لك
Let me pause and review some of the key elements of this conversation that you've just heard between these two officers. First, they acknowledge that our colleague Mohammed al-Baradei is coming, and they know what he's coming for, and they know he's coming the next day. He's coming to look for things that are prohibited. He is expecting these gentlemen to cooperate with him and not hide things. But they're worried. We have this modified vehicle. What do we say if one of them sees it? What is their concern? Their concern is that it's something they should not have, something that should not be seen. The general is incredulous. You didn't get a modified. You don't have one of those, do you? I have one. Which? From where? From the workshop. From the Al-Kindi company. What? From Al-Kindi. I'll come to see you in the morning. I'm worried you all have something left. We evacuated everything. We don't have anything left. Nobody says we evacuated everything. We didn't destroy it. We didn't line it up for inspection. We didn't turn it into the inspectors. We evacuated it to make sure it was not around when the inspectors showed up. I will come to you tomorrow. The Al-Kindi company. This is a company that is well known to have been involved in prohibited weapons systems activity. Let me play another tape for you. As you'll recall, the inspectors found 12 empty chemical warheads on January 16th. On January 20th, 4 days later, Iraq promised the inspectors it would search for more. You will now hear an officer from Republican Guard headquarters issuing an instruction to an officer in the field. Their conversation took place just last week, on January 30th.
سيدي العزيز، نعم. توجيه السيد رئيس أركان الحرس اليوم بالمؤتمر. نعم. تفتشون الاعتداء اللي عندكم. نعم. لاحتمال وجود عتاد محظور. نعم. لاحتمال وجود عتاد محظور بطريق الصدفة. نعم. ودزينا لكم كتاب بتفتيش مناطق الاستكرام والمناطق المتروكة. نعم. هذا بعد ما نفذتوا مضمونه اتلفوا الكتاب. نعم. يعني ما اريد احد يشوف هذا الكتاب. ماشي. اي والله. ماشي. ممنون.
Let me pause again and review the elements of this message. They're inspecting the ammunition you have. Yes. For the possibility there are forbidden ammo. For the possibility there is by chance forbidden ammo. Yes. And we sent you a message yesterday to clean out all of the areas, the scrap areas, the abandoned areas, make sure there is nothing there. Remember the first message, evacuate it. This is all part of a system of hiding things and moving things out of the way and making sure they have left nothing behind. You go a little further into this message and you see the specific instructions from headquarters. After you have carried out what is contained in this message, destroy the message, because I don't want anyone to see this message. Okay. Why? This message would have verified to the inspectors that they have been trying to turn over things. They were looking for things, but they don't want that message seen because they were trying to clean up the area, to leave no evidence behind of the presence of weapons of mass destruction. And they can claim that nothing was there, and the inspectors can look all they want, and they will find nothing. This effort to hide things from the inspectors is not one or two isolated events. Quite the contrary. This is part and parcel of a policy of evasion and deception that goes back 12 years, a policy set at the highest levels of the Iraqi regime. We know that Saddam Hussein has what is called, quote, a higher committee for monitoring the inspection teams, unquote. Think about that. Iraq has a high-level committee to monitor the inspectors who were sent in to monitor Iraq's disarmament. Not to cooperate with them, not to assist them, but to spy on them and keep them from doing their jobs. The committee reports directly to Saddam Hussein. It is headed by Iraq's Vice President, Taha Yassin Ramadan. Its members include Saddam Hussein's son, Qusay. This committee also includes Lieutenant General Amir al-Sadi, an advisor to Saddam. In case that name isn't immediately familiar to you, General Sadi has been the Iraqi regime's primary point of contact for Dr. Blix and Dr. al-Baradei. It was General Sadi who last last fall publicly pledged that Iraq was prepared to cooperate unconditionally with inspectors. Quite the contrary. Saudi's job is not to cooperate. It is to deceive, not to disarm, but to undermine the inspectors, not to support them, but to frustrate them, and to make sure they learn nothing. We have learned a lot about the work of this special committee. We learned that just prior to the return of inspectors last November, the regime has decided to resume what we heard called, quote, the old game of cat and mouse, unquote. For example, let me focus on the now famous declaration that Iraq submitted to this council on December 7th. Iraq never had any intention of complying with this council's mandate. Instead, Iraq planned to use the declaration to overwhelm us and to overwhelm the inspectors with useless information about Iraq's permitted weapons so that we would not have time to pursue Iraq's prohibited weapons. Iraq's goal was to give us in this room, to give those of us on this council, the false impression that the inspection process was working. You saw the result. Dr. Blitz pronounced the 12,200-page declaration rich in volume, but poor in information and practically devoid of new evidence. Could any member of this council honestly rise in defense of this false declaration? Everything we have seen and heard indicates that instead of cooperating actively with the inspectors to ensure the success of their mission, Saddam Hussein and his regime are busy doing all they possibly can to ensure that inspectors succeed in finding absolutely nothing. My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence. I will cite some examples, and these are from human sources. Orders were issued to Iraq's security organizations as well as to Saddam Hussein's own office to hide all correspondence with the Organization of Military Industrialization. This is the organization that oversees Iraq's weapons of mass destruction activities. Make sure there are no documents left which would connect you to the OMI. We know that Saddam's son Qusay ordered the removal of all prohibited weapons from Saddam's numerous palace complexes. We know that Iraqi government officials, members of the ruling Ba'ath Party, and scientists have hidden prohibited items in their homes. Other key files from military and scientific establishments have been placed in cars that are being driven around the countryside by Iraqi intelligence agents to avoid detection. Thanks to intelligence they were provided, the inspectors recently found dramatic confirmation of these reports. When they searched the home of an Iraqi nuclear scientist, they uncovered roughly 2,000 pages of documents. You see them here being brought out of the home and placed in UN hands. Some of the material is classified and related to Iraq's nuclear program. Tell me, answer me, are the inspectors to search the house of every government official, every Ba'ath Party member, and every scientist in the country to find the truth, to get the information they need to satisfy the demands of our council? Our sources tell us that in some cases, the hard drives of computers at Iraqi weapons facilities were replaced. Who took the hard drives? Where did they go? What's being hidden? Why? There's only one answer to the why: to deceive, to hide, to keep from the inspectors. Numerous human sources tell us that the Iraqis are moving not just documents and hard drives, but weapons of mass destruction to keep them from being found by inspectors. While we were here in this council chamber debating Resolution 1441 last fall, we know from sources that a missile brigade outside Baghdad was dispersing rocket launchers and warheads containing biological warfare agent to various locations, distributing them to various locations in western Iraq. Most of the launchers and warheads had been hidden in large groves of palm trees and were to be moved every 1 to 4 weeks to escape detection. We also have satellite photos that indicate that banned materials have recently been moved from a number of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction facilities. Let me say a word about satellite images before I show a couple. The photos that I am about to show you are sometimes hard for the average person to interpret, hard for me. The painstaking work of photo analysis takes experts with years and years of experience poring for hours and hours over light tables. But as I show you these images, I will try to capture and explain what they mean, what they indicate to our imagery specialists. Let's look at one. This one is about a weapons munition facility, a facility that holds ammunition at a place called Taji. This is one of about 65 such facilities in Iraq. We know that this one has housed chemical munitions. In fact, this is where the Iraqis recently came up with the additional 4 chemical weapon shells. Here you see 15 munitions bunkers in yellow and red outlines. The 4 that are in red squares represent active chemical munitions bunkers. How do I know that? How can I say that? Let me give you a closer look. Look at the image on the left. On the left is a close-up of one of the 4 chemical bunkers. The 2 arrows indicate the presence of sure signs that the bunkers are storing chemical munitions. The arrow at the top that says security points to a facility that is a signature item for this kind of bunker. Inside that facility are special guards and special equipment to monitor any leakage that might come out of the bunker. The truck you also see is a signature item. It's a decontamination vehicle in case something goes wrong. This is characteristic of those 4 bunkers. The special security facility and the decontamination vehicle will be in the area. If not at any one of them or one of the other, it is moving around those 4, and it moves as it needed to move as people are working in the different bunkers. Now look at the picture on the right. You are now looking at 2 of those sanitized bunkers. The signature vehicles are gone. The tents are gone. It's been cleaned up, and it was done on the 22nd of December as the UN inspection team is arriving, and you can see the inspection vehicles arriving in the lower portion of the picture on the right. The bunkers are clean when the inspectors get there. They found nothing. This sequence of events raises the worrisome suspicion that Iraq had been tipped off to the forthcoming inspections at Taji. As it did throughout the 1990s, we know that Iraq today is actively using its considerable intelligence capabilities to hide its illicit activities. From our sources, we know that inspectors are under constant surveillance by an army of Iraqi intelligence operatives. Iraq is relentlessly attempting to tap all of their communications, both voice and electronics. I would call my colleagues' attention to the fine paper that the United Kingdom distributed yesterday, which describes in exquisite detail Iraqi deception activities. In this next example, you will see the type of concealment activity Iraq has undertaken in response to the resumption of inspections. Indeed, in November 2002, just when the inspections were about to resume, this type of activity spiked. Here are 3 examples. At this ballistic missile site on November 10th, we saw a cargo truck preparing to move ballistic missile components. At this biological weapons-related facility on November 25th, just 2 days before inspections resumed, this truck caravan appeared, something we almost never see at this facility, and we monitor it carefully and regularly. At this ballistic missile facility, again, 2 days before inspections began, 5 large cargo trucks appeared, along with the truck-mounted crane to move missiles. We saw this kind of house cleaning at close to 30 sites. Days after this activity, the vehicles and the equipment that I've just highlighted disappear, and the site returns to patterns of normalcy. We don't know precisely what Iraq was moving, but the inspectors already knew about these sites, so Iraq knew that they would be coming. We must ask ourselves, why would Iraq suddenly move equipment of this nature before inspections if they were anxious to demonstrate what they had or did not have? Remember the first intercept in which 2 Iraqis talked about the need to hide a modified vehicle from the inspectors. Where did Iraq take all of this equipment? Why wasn't it presented to the inspectors? Iraq also has refused to permit any U-2 reconnaissance flights that would give the inspectors a better sense of what's being moved before, during, and after inspections. This refusal to allow this kind of reconnaissance is in direct, specific violation of operative paragraph 7 of our resolution 1441.
That was Colin Powell, who went on for another 50 minutes at the United Nations with a completely fabricated case against Iraq, alleging the things you heard and much, much more, the vast majority of which, and all of the relevant parts of which, were fabricated by the administration with the knowledge of many of the higher level officials.
To me. I despise, 'cause it means destruction of innocent lives. War means tears to thousands of mothers' eyes when their sons go off to fight and lose their lives. I said war. Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely. Get sad again.
This is CPRmetro.org, Community Progressive Radio for the Metropolitan New York area and the world. You are inside our 12-hour special commemorating the February 15th, 2003 global protests against the war that was coming on the people of Iraq by the United States. George Bush, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and many others had a hand in that. And Colin Powell, as we just heard, at the United Nations. That was step 2 of Joe Biden's suggested conditions for President Bush. First, he presented to the American people his plans in the 2003 State of the Union address, which you heard earlier. And then Colin Powell presented to the United Nations, as you just heard. Well, the response was massive by the people on February 15th. Exactly 10 years ago today, on February 17th, which was the Monday after the Saturday demonstration, this familiar news program summed up what happened on February 15th, 2003, and we're going to go to that right now. CPRmetro.org.
From Pacifica Radio, this is Democracy Now!
Listen to the voice of the people. For many times, the voice of the people is the voice of God.
I'm standing in Hyde Park. We've had a demonstration where some estimates are now in the region of 2 million people.
Possibly the biggest ever in Australia. Over 200,000 people.
Italy, 1.8 million people.
Reporting from Madrid, Spain, 750,000 people are here, and it is unbelievable.
Hi, this is Arundhati Roy, and I'm calling from Kerala in India, and I'm calling to speak to the people on the streets of New York and on the streets of almost every major city in the world.
The world says no to war. Tens of millions of people around the globe take to the streets to protest a Bush war, the U.S. plans to attack Iraq. In New York, Desmond Tutu, Danny Glover, Harry Belafonte, Angela Davis, and dozens of others spoke to crowds of hundreds of thousands. All that and more coming up. Tens of millions of people took to the streets over the weekend in some 600 cities around the world. They marched and rallied to protest the Bush administration's plans to attack Iraq. And New York City organizers say somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people rallied. In San Francisco, 250,000 people marched. London, Madrid, and Barcelona each saw over 1 million people in the streets. Organizers say over 3 million marched in Rome. London Guardian's reporting Italian state television did not broadcast the protests live because it would put, quote, undue pressure on politicians. Hundreds of other protests were held, spread across every continent in the world. Sites included Australia, Johannesburg, Tel Aviv, Syria, Tokyo, Bangladesh, South Korea, Hong Kong, Thailand, Puerto Rico, Brazil, East Timor, India, and even the South Pole. We recorded these live reports from around the world.
Hi, my name's Andrew Bergen. I'm standing in Hyde Park. It's just getting dark. We've had the most wonderful day here today. We've had a demonstration where some estimates are now in the region of 2 million people. We had a fantastic range of speakers, major political figures, but most importantly of all, we had Jesse Jackson here, who was wonderful. He spoke on the stage with Tim Robbins, a very important actor from the States, and he also did a little thing with Miss Dynamite, who's a very well-known singer here. It's been a wonderful day, and really we think we've made a huge and impressive point against the war drive. Tony Blair has been really thrown by the Blix report at the United Nations yesterday. They were hoping that Blix would be far harder on the Iraqi regime, but Blix is saying that really they found nothing of importance, and in a sense there's nothing to justify war. Tony Blair is very isolated in Britain. He now only has 9% support for a war without a second UN resolution, and it looks as if they won't get a second UN resolution. So he's been up in Scotland today talking about the morality of war. Well, we're also talking about the morality of war. We're saying that this war in Iraq would be immoral and that we are against it. And I think today we've seen the people of Britain stand up and be counted. This has been tremendous. This has been the biggest demonstration in British political history.
G'day, my name's Damien Lawson. I'm the coordinator of the Victorian Peace Network in Melbourne, Australia. We're a growing coalition of trade unions, students, churches, environment groups, as well as local peace groups right across southeastern Australia. And we've just had the biggest demonstration in Melbourne we've ever had in Melbourne, possibly the biggest ever in Australia. Over 200,000 people filling the streets of Melbourne, protesting against George Bush's plan for war. And of course, the strong element that was coming right through the protest was wanting to bring Australian troops home from the Middle East, to be really opposed to John Howard's support for George Bush. John Howard's the leader of Australia. And it was really clear and strong coming through the demonstration that people saw this as being a war for oil and not about weapons of mass destruction, that people wanted to support the people of Iraq, not Saddam Hussein, but the way to do that is not through bringing more devastation on Iraq than's already been caused over the last 10 years.
My name is Gabriele Solaris from Greenpeace Italy, and the peace rally is not yet ended. 1.8 million people turned out, and it was a very colorful, long march lasting since 11 o'clock in the morning till now, and the process is still going on with a lot of music of people and a lot of people witnesses speaking in the main square where the old people gathered in Rome.
So hello to everybody. Here's Johannes Wims calling from Berlin in Germany. Yesterday we had a huge protest here in Berlin. Maybe you've heard about it. The police was speaking about 300,000 participants, but then they corrected and came up to 500,000. So being in a city of a bit less than 4 million inhabitants, this is quite a huge demonstration, and we didn't have such an experience since the early 80s during the protests on the Pershing and cruise missile.
Hi, this is Kit Kagwin. I'm from Paris, France. I was at the Manif. Manif is French for protest. It started down in the south of Paris, and it went up to Place Bastille. And it was really nice. It was a very sunny day. There were about a couple of 100,000 people.
Hi, my name's Edgar Barons. I'm reporting from Madrid, Spain, where the crowd here is just unbelievable. The crowd reaches, they're saying it's about 2 miles long, 500,000 people, perhaps 750,000 people are here. You'll see all walks of life here, people from the very young to the very old. Spain has a situation here where 92% of the population is actually against the war, and yet President Aznar is backing Bush 100%. Yesterday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the Security Council, Ana Palacios, the Minister of Foreign Affairs here from Spain, was very eager to declare war. The people here are completely taken aback by her warmongering, and they are out in the streets in numbers. 750,000 people are here, and it is unbelievable. Pedro Almodovar will be speaking soon here. He's going to open up the rally. Heard from the officials here that people are basically 2 miles away. They cannot even get any closer to the stage because it is so packed. The streets of Spain of Madrid are completely packed.
Hi, this is Arundhati Roy, and I'm calling from Kerala in India, where it's close to midnight, and I'm calling to speak to the people on the streets of New York and on the streets of almost every major city in the world, and I just want to make a small statement. The U.S. government's war to promote terrorism, because that's what it is, it promotes terrorism, has launched a two-pronged assault on the world. One is a military assault in the Middle East that seeks to redraw the map of that region and establish U.S. hegemony over oil. And the other is an assault on the intelligence of the human race. It's not the lies we're being told, but the quality of those lies that is truly insulting. And what we in the peace movement must do is to try and turn every bomb that is dropped on Iraq, that has been dropped on Iraq, into an expose of the criminals that are waging this war, because they are baby killers, water poisoners, long-distance bombers, merchants of death. And each of you who is marching for peace today is doing a wonderful, wonderful thing. Let no one persuade you otherwise. I wish I were there. goodbye, and lots of love. Once again, this is Arundhati calling from India.
The voice of the Indian writer Arundhati Roy in a surprise call to the protest in New York, among many other voices from around the world. There were also hundreds of protests in hundreds of smaller American cities and towns, from Coopville, Washington to Augusta, Maine. Tomorrow we'll hear a report from Colorado Springs, where thousands rallied peacefully until police attacked the crowd with tear gas and rubber bullets. We'll also hear a report from San Francisco, where 250,000 people protested on Sunday. But right now, NATO has reached an agreement to carry out a U.S.-led plan to defend Turkey in the event of a war with Iraq, despite French opposition. The controversy began when the U.S. requested NATO provide Turkey with troops, surveillance planes, Patriot missile batteries, and chemical biological defenses. France, Germany, and Belgium vetoed the move. They said it would send the wrong signal at a time when they were hoping diplomacy and UN weapons inspections, not war, were the best way to disarm Iraq. Germany and Belgium eventually agreed to drop their objections. When France refused, the decision was moved to the Defense Planning Committee, of which France is not a member and therefore could not issue a veto.
Freedom, 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 freedom. Sometimes I feel like I'm a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like I'm a motherless child.
This is CPRmetro.org, and you're inside our February 15th, 2003 remembrance, when the world stood up and said no to war in the hundreds of millions. This is Democracy Now!'s report on February 17th,
the protest
2003.
rally in New York. It is not clear how many people rallied. It is believed between 500,000 and 1 million people were in the streets of New York. The New York City administration had denied organizers a permit to march, so demonstrators were forced to hold a stationary rally near the United Nations. Tens of thousands of people stretched north from the stage along First Avenue. Then it became hundreds of thousands, as tens of thousands were also on the streets of Second Avenue and Third Avenue and other parts of the city, were met by police on horseback as well as riot police. Police barricaded the side streets leading to First Avenue, preventing more than 100,000 people from reaching the even stationary rally. So many people flooded the streets, police were overwhelmed, and in the end, the people took over the streets anyway. Well, we're going to now go to Saturday's New York rally. We begin with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, internationally renowned for his nonviolent campaign against apartheid in South Africa. The son of a school teacher and a domestic worker, Bishop Tutu became the first black general secretary of the South African Council of Churches in 1978. In the 80s, he was one of the leading spokespeople for nonviolent resistance to apartheid. Archbishop Tutu led a campaign for an international boycott of South African goods and was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for the divestment campaign in 1984. He was elected Bishop of Johannesburg in 1985 and the Archbishop of Cape Town a year later. He retired from that office in 1996 but was immediately named Archbishop Emeritus. In 1995, then-President Nelson Mandela appointed Tutu to chair South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Archbishop Tutu is the author of Crying in the Wilderness and the Rainbow People of God, The Making of a Peaceful Revolution. He spoke at the protest in New York, The World Says No to War.
Hello! Hello! You are all such wonderful, wonderful people. I want to give you a very warm clap. Let's join me in clapping you. Come on. Oh! Thank you very much for coming out when it is not so warm. God is proud of you. God is smiling as God looks down on First, Second, and Third Avenue. God says, hey, aren't they neat? Because God is with us. People marched and demonstrated, and the Berlin Wall fell, and communism was ended. People marched and demonstrated, and apartheid ended. And democracy and freedom were born. And now people are marching and people are demonstrating because people are saying no to war. We say no to war. The just war theory says you need a legitimate authority to declare and to wage war. Only the United Nations is that legitimate authority. Any other war is immoral. The just war says, have you exhausted all possible peaceful means? And the world says, no, we haven't yet. And any war before you have exhausted all possible peaceful means is immoral. And those who want to wage war against Iraq must know it would be an immoral war. You know, those who are going to be killed in Iraq are not collateral damage. They are human beings of flesh and blood. They are children. They are mothers. They are brothers. They are grandfathers. You know what? They are our sisters and brothers. For we belong in one family. We are members of one family, God's family, the human family. And how can we say we want to drop bombs on our sisters and brothers, on our children? We said no to communism. We said no to apartheid. We said no to injustice. We said no to oppression. And we said yes to freedom. Yes to democracy. Now, I ask you, what do we say to war? I can't hear you. What do you say to war? What do you say to death and destruction? What do you say to peace? I can't hear you. What do you say to peace? What do you say to life? What do you say to freedom? What do you say to compassion? Well, we want to say, President Bush, listen to the voice of the people. For many times The voice of the people is the voice of God. Vox populi, vox Dei. Listen to the voice of the people saying, give peace a chance. Give peace a chance. And let's say once more so that they can hear in the Pentagon, they can hear in the White House, what do we say to war? What do we say to peace?
Bishop Desmond Tutu at the World Says No to War protest in New York City as we go to break with Holly Near and then hear Harry Belafonte.
Praying, I'm afraid of what you do in the name of your God. Can we rise up, find the higher power, free up from fear, it will devour you. Watch out for the ego of the hour, the ones who say they know it are the ones who will impose it on you. I ain't afraid of your Yahweh. I ain't afraid of your Allah. I ain't afraid of your Jesus. I'm afraid of what you do in the name of your God. Rise up. Find the higher story, free up from the gods of war and glory. Watch out for the threats of purgatory. The spirit of the wind will make a killing off of sin or Satan.
Holly Near at the World Says No to War protest in New York City in sub-freezing temperatures on Saturday as we turn now to actor and activist Harry Belafonte.
Today is a historic and a proud day in the name of America. The world has sat by with tremendous anxiety and with great fear that we did not exist. They have been told and they have felt that what our country, with its press and the leaders in the administration have said, we today invalidate all that. We stand for peace. We stand for the truth of what is at the heart of the American people. This is not the first time that we as a people have been misled by the leadership. We were misled by those who created the falseness of the Bay of Tonkin, which falsely led us into a war with Vietnam, a war that we could not and did not win. We lied to the American people about Grenada and what was going on in that tiny island. We've lied to the American people about Nicaragua, El Salvador, Cuba, and many places in the world. And we stand here today to let those people and others know that America is a vast and diverse country, and we are part of the greater truth of what makes our nation. Dr. King once said that if mankind does not put an end to war, war will put an end to mankind. It was also said by a great president that when the state and the leaders of our government moves to a place of tyranny and becomes a society of secrecy, it is incumbent upon the citizens to not only raise their voices in criticism and protest, but they must understand that it is the right thing to do, that they are doing the patriotic thing. And those who fail to raise their voices with us today are the traitors of patriotism. Were my friend Dr. King alive today, he would smile, because we will make a difference. And the message that we send to the world today is one of warmth and confidence, and we stand in solidarity with all the people of the world who are marching at this very moment to join us in this end to war. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Harry Belafonte addressing the anti-war protest in New York. Afterwards, we managed to pull him aside for a quick interview.
My comments about General Colin Powell is really not a personal confrontation. Black Americans and many peoples of color have always taken great pride in what those of us who have come from a history of oppression have achieved. And when an individual breaks through and comes into the place where decisions are made that can make a difference, we then have high expectations. Once that is rejected by those who have acquired this position, we may sit in quiet disappointment. But when the person who achieves that distinction then puts him or herself in the service of our oppression and those who create new ways in which to oppress us, that is morally unacceptable. And that is my argument with General Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice. I expect, as do others, that their history should have prepared them for a much better articulation about how to treat people globally. Most of the people in the world who suffer from tyranny, most of the people in the world who suffer from the tyranny of oppression, the tyranny of hunger, the tyranny of ignorance, the tyranny of HIV/AIDS, there sits terror. And when you look very carefully at what it is that has caused this constant oppression, you will see that somewhere in there, America plays the game. And this gathering here today helps us understand that there is another America that is strong, that is resolute, and are made up of millions and millions of people. As a matter of fact, we do make the majority voice in this nation, and that we have let the world know that we are in solidarity with those who seek to have other ways than war to settle our grievances.
Mr. Belafonte, you have been an outspoken critic of the government, U.S. government, for decades now in your role as a part of the peace and justice community. If you had an opportunity to speak with President Bush, a man of your stature, what would your message be to him?
Dr. King once said that to conquer your enemy is no victory. He will only rise again to confront you. What we've got to do is to look for the moral center that will help us prevail in convincing these men and some of the women who are involved with them that it is not politically expedient to do what they're doing. They're killing people all over the world and stimulating the possibility that that anger will continue and that rage will continue to haunt the generations that come after us. What I try to convince the president on is that he can no longer play a morally bankrupt game, that he must understand that people will not stand for it, and that we will come the right time, which would be the next election. If it is not stolen from us again, we will be able to emphatically show the world that America is not for war.
What about that issue of the election being stolen? The fact that the man who occupies the White House right now was not democratically elected president?
I think that was the first sign for Americans that we are in great jeopardy. Most people say, not in America. You know, fascism and oppression cannot happen in this country. That is more a prayer than a possibility. And I think that when we saw the theft of our government, when we saw the suspension of civil liberties, when we saw the changing of the Constitution, when we see that people can be arrested without charge and without counsel and without anybody communicating, All of these are signals that we are in great danger of becoming oppressive and totalitarian. It was exactly the same way things happened in Nazi Germany. And people in the beginning remained silent, and that silence began to erupt when it was a little too late. I think America's got to awaken to the truth of what's going on in our nation.
Right. The administration has said that the Homeland Security Act is necessary in order to protect Americans. Given what you've just said, what is your reaction to this Homeland Security Act that tends to be rolling back or eroding the constitutional?
I think the security that American people need is the security of truth. I think they need the security of employment. I think they need the security of social and physical development. I think we need to have health care. I think we need security in education. We sit with the largest population of prisoners in the world. Over 2 million men and women suffer in our prisons for reasons that they don't deserve to be in prison for. And I believe that when you look at that number, most of them are African Americans and Mexicans. We have more black people in the prisons of America than we have in the universities of America. And I think therein sits the great insecurity of this country. Were we to change all that, America would be one of the most secure nations in the world. And what these men are doing, and Ashcroft's doing, with all of this hoopla, is to distract the American people, and we are being misled. And we must be very careful. There's an old saying that if you control what people know, you control what people do. And we must get out the truth so people can begin to think differently.
Harry Belafonte, I spoke to him with Verna Avery Brown of Pacifica Radio as we turn now back to the stage with Angela Davis at the protests The World Says No to War.
Good afternoon. It is a good afternoon to be in New York City. This vast community gathered here in fierce solidarity with people who are demonstrating all over the world, in Seattle and in Raleigh, in Rome, London, Cape Town, and Manila. This community most perfectly represents the city of New York. Thank you. Yesterday, Colin Powell boasted in the UN Security Council that he represented the world's oldest democracy. New York City's refusal to grant a march permit for this demonstration is a travesty of democracy. And so we are here this afternoon to assert our democratic right to march. We are here to challenge the Bush administration's strategy of pretending to defend democracy by trampling upon people's democratic rights. We thus oppose the USA Patriot Act and other legislation specifically targeting immigrant communities. This is a historic protest, and we link our protests against the war on Iraq to the historic 1982 March to the United Nations, a march of 1 million people demanding nuclear disarmament. 21 years later, as we say, no war on Iraq, we are still calling for nuclear disarmament. It is ironic how the term weapons of mass destruction has become inextricably linked to Iraq. Have we forgotten which country claims the largest nuclear arsenal in the world? And so, yes, we say no weapons of mass destruction should be in the hands of any government in the world. The Bush administration tries to generate fear and hysteria, tactics reminiscent of the McCarthy era. Tom Ridge hoped to set off a national march to hardware stores for plastic sheeting and duct tape. Some people may have joined that march of fear, but many more are participating in demonstrations of collective courage. We are here today because we are concerned about the deterioration of political culture instigated by George W. Bush. He has lowered the level of political discourse to discussions about evildoers and hunts for terrorists. This simplistic political discourse is fundamentalist in its impulse. It is designed to stop critical thinking. It is designed to prevent us from recognizing the U.S. government's and corporate designs on Iraq's oil. Our responsibility to stop the war on Iraq is a responsibility to the future. We cannot allow the U.S. government to establish a precedent that justifies future assaults, especially on peoples of the southern region of the world. We are here because we are concerned about rising poverty in our own country. We are concerned about attacks against single mothers, about structural racism, about homophobia, about the incarceration of what the government considers disposable population. We are concerned about the continued repression of political prisoners, including Mumia Abu-Jamal and the 5 Cubans in Florida. We are concerned about the symbiotic relationship between the prison industrial complex and the military industrial complex. We are concerned that we are on the brink of war. But we feel heartened that key members of the UN Security Council are resisting the rhetorical tricks of Colin Powell. And the French Foreign Minister, Dominique de Villepin, evoked the rapidly developing global anti-war movement when he said yesterday, "Give peace a chance." We are here because we stand together in solidarity with the September 11 Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. And we are heartened because we know that our bodies, our voices, our hearts do make a difference. They make a difference when we unite as we are doing today, when we unite for peace and when we unite for justice. Thank you.
Angela Davis. Danny Glover also addressed the New York protests. The world says no to war.
Peace, no war. Peace, no war. We come here to reclaim our right as citizens of the world to peacefully protest. We must all stand as one voice. We've come to demand that the real users of weapons of mass destruction, our own country, dismantle them. That those who manufactured this climate of fear stop their lives and heed the will of the people and the nation and the rest of the world to say no to war. That's why we come here. We've overcome many obstacles in order to stand here this afternoon. For one, nature's unyielding and unforgiving reminder that this is mid-February and it's cold. But Mother Earth has smiled on us because she understands clearly that our voice must be heard. She knows that she is sick and only we the people can heal her. She knows that. We've overcome the obstacles that have been placed in our path on this journey by the city of New York and the state of New York and the federal institutions, yet we overcome our own fear to be here today, because only with the acknowledgement of that fear do we demonstrate our real courage to stand up today. But we're here. We stand here because our right to dissent and our right to be participants in a true democracy has been hijacked by an administration of liars and murderers who curse us because we stand in the way of their tyranny, who cursed us because we stand in the way of their unholy and brutal agenda. An administration whose villainy and greed is insatiable. We stand at this threshold of history and say to them, not in our names, not in our names. But we stand here, and our stand is critical because inevitably in the future we'll have to challenge U.S. policy in the Gulf of Guinea. We'll have to challenge U.S. policy in other places where other oil-producing countries in Africa. We'll have to do that, and we have to challenge the potential recolonization of Africa. So we stand here. But we stand here because we stand on the shoulders of others who've come before us and who call for peace and justice. Men and women like Fannie Lou Hamer, Harriet Tubman, Martin and Malcolm, W.E.B. Du Bois, Toussaint Louverture, who at 47 years old led an assault against slavery on the island of Haiti 200 years ago. And we stand here, yes, we stand here, because Paul Robeson would be proud for us to stand here. And he would say to us that we are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder.
And you are listening to Democracy Now! The world says no to war. The massive rally in New York on Saturday, joining tens of millions of other people around the world protesting war. Our break now with Betty on the New York stage.
Na 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 na. I'm Humpty Dumpty who's had a great fall. I'm mixed up and messed up and all turned around. I'm upset, downset, and no fun at all. I'm people, just
And we're in the last 15 minutes or so of CPR Metro's revisiting and commemoration of February 15th, 2003. We've reviewed all of the stepping stones that led up to that date, beginning with the congressional hearings that led to the passage of the war resolution in October of 2002. The first big protest that was held after that in October. Another protest held in Washington in early January. President Bush's State of the Union address in 2003, where he laid out the case for war against Iraq. Tony Benn's interview with Saddam Hussein on February 4th, where the questions of weapons of mass destruction and Al-Qaeda and others that were the basis for the American plans for war were directly addressed. Colin Powell's presentation to the United Nations Security Council the following day on February 5th. And then the world's response to the U.S.'s decision to go to war without the UN Security Council approving it. Again, February 15th, 2003, the largest demonstration in human history. Participation in more than 800 cities.
You are listening to Democracy
Hundreds
Now!,
of millions.
The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On the day before the worldwide protest, Chief UN Weapons Inspectors Hans Blix and Mohammed al-Baradei went before the United Nations Security Council to announce no weapons of mass destruction had been found in Iraq. Blix cast doubt on evidence provided to the UN by Secretary of State Colin Powell, and al-Baradei called for increased inspections. Their report was followed by an impassioned anti-war address by French Foreign Minister Dominique de Villepin. When he finished his remarks before the Security Council, the gallery burst into spontaneous applause, an unprecedented event at the United Nations. We'll hear his remarks in a moment, but first we'll start with an excerpt of UN Weapons Inspector Hans Blix.
More than 200 chemical and more than 100 biological samples have been collected at different sites. 3/4 of these have been screened using our own analytical laboratory capabilities at the Baghdad Center. The results to date have been consistent with the Iraqi declarations. We have now commenced the process of destroying approximately 50 liters of mustard gas declared by Iraq that was being kept under UNMOVIC seal at the Mutana site. 1/3 of the quantity has already been destroyed. The laboratory quantity of thioglycol, a mustard gas precursor, which we found at another site, has also been destroyed. The total number of staff in Iraq now exceeds 250 from 60 countries. This includes about 100 UNMOVIC inspectors, 15 IA inspectors, 15 air crew, and 65 support staff. Mr. President, in my 27th of January update to the Council, I said that it seemed from our experience that Iraq had decided in principle to provide cooperation on process, most importantly prompt access to all sites and assistance to UNMOVIC in the establishment of the necessary infrastructure. This impression remains, and we note that access to sites has so far been without problems, including those that have never been declared or inspected, as well as to presidential sites and private residences. In my last updating, I also said that a decision to cooperate on substance was indispensable in order to bring through inspection the disarmament task to completion and to set the monitoring system on a firm course. Such cooperation, as I have noted, requires more than the opening of doors. In the words of Resolution 1441, it requires immediate, unconditional and active efforts by Iraq to resolve existing questions of disarmament, either by presenting remaining proscribed items and programs for elimination, or by presenting convincing evidence that they have been eliminated. In the current situation, one would expect Iraq to be eager to comply. While we were in Baghdad, we met a delegation from the government of South Africa. It was there to explain how South Africa gained the confidence of the world in its dismantling of the nuclear weapons program by a wholehearted cooperation over 2 years with IAEA inspectors. I have just learned that Iraq has accepted an offer by South Africa to send a group of experts for further talks. How much, if any, is left of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and related proscribed items and programs? So far, UNMOVIC has not found any such weapons, only a small number of empty chemical munitions which should have been declared and destroyed.
Chief UN Weapons Inspector Hans Blix addressing the United Nations Security Council on Friday. The first permanent member of the UN Security Council to respond was French Foreign Minister Dominique de Villepin. He spoke through a translator.
There are those who think that inspections in their very essence cannot be effective at all. But let me recall that that was the very foundation of Resolution 1441. And that inspections are producing results. One may judge them inadequate, but the results are there. Then there are those who believe that continuing the inspection process is a kind of delaying tactic to prevent or avert military intervention. That naturally raises the question of how much time is allowed Iraq. And this brings us to the heart of the matter. What is at stake is our credibility and our sense of responsibility. Let us have the courage to see things as they are. There are two options. The option of war might seem a priori to be the swiftest. But let us not forget that having won the war, peace has to be built. Let us not delude ourselves. This will be long and difficult because it will be necessary to preserve Iraq's unity and to restore stability in a lasting way in a country and a region harshly affected by the intrusion of force. Faced with that perspective, there is an alternative: inspections, which allow us to move forward day by day with the effective and peaceful disarmament of Iraq. In the end, is that choice not the most sure and most rapid? No one today can claim that the path of war will be shorter than the path of inspections. No one can claim that it would lead to a safer, more just, more stable world. For war is always the sanction of failure. Would this be our sole recourse in the face of the many challenges at this time? So let us give the United Nations inspectors the time they need for their mission to succeed. But also let us all be vigilant and ask Mr. Blix and Mr. El Baradei to report regularly to the Council. France, for its part, would propose another meeting on 14 March at the ministerial level to assess the situation. We would then be able to judge the progress made and what remains to be done. Given this context, the use of force is not justified at this time. There is an alternative to war: disarming Iraq via inspections. Moreover, premature recourse to the military option would be fraught with risks. The authority of our action is based today on the unity of the international community.
You are listening to Dominique de Villepin, the French foreign minister at the United Nations Security Council on Friday. The protests on Saturday were preceded by the protest at the Security Council on Friday. We're back to Dominique de Villepin.
Such intervention could have incalculable consequences for the stability of this scarred and fragile region. It would compound the sense of injustice, increase tension, and risk paving the way to other conflicts. We all share the same priority: fighting terrorism mercilessly. This fight requires total determination. Since the tragedy of September 11, this has been one of the highest priorities facing our peoples. France has been struck hard by this terrible scourge several times, and it is wholly mobilized in this fight, which involves all of us, which we must pursue together. That was the sense of the Security Council meeting held on 20 January on France's initiative. 10 days ago, the U.S. Secretary of State, Mr. Powell, reported alleged links between Al-Qaeda and the Baghdad regime. Given the present state of our research and intelligence in liaison with our allies, nothing allows us to establish such links. But we must assess the impact that disputed military action would have on this level. Would such intervention today not be liable to exacerbate divisions between societies, cultures, peoples, divisions that nurture terrorism? All along, France has been saying, we do not exclude the possibility that force may have to be used one day. If the inspectors' reports concluded it was impossible to continue inspections, the Council would then have to take a decision, and its members would have to meet all of their responsibilities. In such an eventuality, I just want to recall now the questions I stressed at our last debate on 4 February, which we must answer. To what extent do the nature and extent of the threat justify immediate recourse to force? How do we ensure that the considerable risks of such intervention can actually be kept under control? In any case, in such an eventuality, it is the unity of the international community that would ensure and guarantee its effectiveness. It is the United Nations that, whatever happens, will still tomorrow be at the center of the peace to be built. To those who are anguished, wondering when and how we are going to cede to war, I would like to say that nothing at any time in this Council will be done in haste, in misunderstanding, out of suspicion, or out of fear. In this temple of the United Nations, we are the guardians of an ideal, the guardians of a conscience.
We've been listening to Democracy Now!'s report on February 15th, 2003, which was a Saturday, as it aired on Monday, February 17th, 2003. And that is about it for our 12-hour special looking at and commemorating February 13th, 2003, the day of the largest protest in human history involving hundreds of millions of people on every continent on the planet, and even 1 million here in New York when it was freezing cold.
Stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. And it is true that much of the intelligence
CPRmetro.org, community progressive radio for the metropolitan New York area and the world. From the metropolitan New York area to the world and beyond, wherever you may be. You've been inside the CPR commemoration of February 15th, 2003. Keep it right here.